What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Adam Nimoy. We're talking about his memoir, The Most Human, Reconciling with My Father, Leonard Nimoy. That book is available now. Another great conversation. It was just really awesome to dig a little bit deeper into Adam's story and hear him expand on what he talked about in his memoir. And I think some of this stuff will really resonate. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Adam. So today we've got Adam Nimoy. We're talking about his memoir, The Most Human, Reconciling with My Father, Leonard Nimoy. Adam, thanks so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed memoir. With memoirs, I feel like you never know what you're gonna get, but I could tell that you like talent for writing and I appreciate like your authenticity, all that good stuff. I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper today.
Great. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So to get started, could you maybe give a little summary of the book so that people can follow along with the conversation if they haven't picked it up yet?
Yeah. What is the book about? And the book is about in part, my journey with my father, Leonard Nimoy. I was 10 years old when Star Trek went on the air and our lives changed dramatically. I had a very complicated relationship with my dad in that when I was a kid, I had trouble relating to him because he came from the streets of Boston, an immigrant neighborhood. His parents were Russian immigrants. They came from Ukraine actually, but they considered themselves Russian. He was a hustler. He was not an academic. He was all about trying to get ahead and make money. And he came out to Hollywood with no help or support. His parents did not want him to become an actor, they wanted him to become a doctor or a lawyer. And his whole focus was on hustling and breaking through in his career, even though he magically, 7 years after he got to LA, had a family of four to support. But the family was not his priority. And I had a lot of trouble relating to him as a kid, even though we had some outings together. We were just not connecting at all. He never really had a childhood. He really never hung out with me. He never knew what my interests were. He was always focused on other things. And then by the time I became a teenager and later, and he was full on into his alcoholism, which he admitted to his co star Bill Shatner in an interview, and I was very much into my marijuana habit. We had a lot of conflict between the two of us intermittently, which was, I think, exacerbated by our addiction issues. I was always proud of my dad, it was a great ride being his son because of many of his successes. But we had a lot of trouble until we finally got into 12-step recovery and were able to reconcile with one another.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. And again, thank you for just allowing yourself to be an open book about it. And just really, I think self awareness is half the battle. Like, just with anybody who's either dealing with substance abuse issues or mental health, things, if that, any issues that are very personal. I think self awareness and obviously substance abuse, things like that tend to run in the family. And I imagine that just added, like you said, there was just like that kind of joint struggle, separate and together, like when you interact and trying just to develop a relationship, father and son, which is so important in and of itself. And I those were one of the some of the parts that I just really it spoke. It was like really captivated me because I think that's where you get the most vulnerable, the most honest, and you were humble about it, but then also you were honest, but then I you were entertaining. I enjoyed your writing style, and I think that has to do. I think that has to do with just being a creative because your background is you got into a lot of like show writing, correct?
Show directing. I
Show
was in the
directing.
TV industry, yeah, for
Yeah.
many years.
So, did that were those like any kind of skills transfer over to you writing and releasing and like developing a memoir? Were there any skills like that kind of prepared you?
Well, yeah. I actually started off as an attorney, and when you go to law school, the first book they make you read is plain English for lawyers. And I did a lot of contract drafting, and you have to be very specific about the language, so that was helpful. And then a lot of the work that I did in TV was storytelling, and it was all about really trying to find out what the theme of the through line of the piece is. That was what was helpful to really get an idea of that and get a grip on what the moral of the story was. Because as a director, you have to make a lot of decisions, and all that flows from what you think the through line or the spine of the piece is, the message of the piece, the theme of the piece. And by the same token, it was really helpful in terms of zooming out to figure out what it was I wanted to say in the book. Now, I still needed help. I did hire a freelance editor in New York, somebody who had been in the publishing industry for many years, Brenda Copeland, and she knew nothing about Star Trek, and which was perfect. And I wanted like her female sensibility about all this to help me zoom out and focus in on what the theme should be, and in more particular about what to, and it helped me technically become a better writer, as well as help me decide what to leave off the page, because this is not a tell all. It's not mommy dearest, and it's not a blame game. I'm trying to be honest about what happened with my dad. Some of it is very unpleasant. We spilled some blood on the page, but it's not an indictment of him. I share responsibility in that respect. And so, everything I've done has given me been helpful in helping me. And I've been a writer all my life. I'm not widely published. I've been writing and journaling all my life. So it was all these combinations of things that I think helped prepare me to finally crank out this book.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I like the way that you put that because and is this your first book, right? Like your first like
No, I actually put out a memoir in '08, yeah, but it was not, I didn't have, there was no publicity, there was no promotion. It was a situation where the publisher put out a lot of stuff to see what stuck.
okay.
And that week, A Dog Named Sprite is what the bestseller that superseded my sales. And they started pumping money into that book and let mine go.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone there for anybody who's wanted to get something published or has had something published. So, was there any so that I imagine this experience was that much different than that first title and were there any big lessons learned? Like did you approach it differently? Things like that?
No, I think there were a lot of lessons learned. Brenda was ruthless. She said, "You take out the word and take out the word but. Those two words you are no longer allowed to use." There were things like that. There were very technical things that she really helped me with. It was also great when I could dig deeper and delivered stuff to her, because when she was editing the manuscript, I would add things in there that I thought might be relevant. And she put it in the margin. She'd say, "This is gold you've been holding out on me," which is a note I really love getting. Or when she flat out laughed on the pay, then I knew I was on the right track and I was appealing to her sense of humor. There were a lot of things, a lot of technical things about organizing the book, and then focusing on what it should be about and how to make the pitch to the publisher that would be a saleable angle on the book. Because initially I was just writing a book about recovery and families, about my relationship with my mother, my ex wife, and the soon to be ex wife, and my kids turning into teenagers, and how I used to deal with all their stuff by going off and getting high, and what it's like not being able to do that anymore. But then the elephant in the room was really the Leonard story. That was a big part of that. That was the key relationship in my life, the most troublesome relationship in my life. And then Brenda felt that was just going to be the angle to help me sell the story, that people would be interested, and it would be a more eye opening if the book revolved initially around that. And then as I delve off into my relationship with my Jewish mother, very challenging, and my ex-wife and my daughter, the women in my life who were also knew how to press my buttons, let's just say.
I tell people it's like it's coming from a former teenage girl. It's almost like a rite of passage because I didn't get along with my dad from like age 12 to 22. I don't like, or we fought a lot more. We just like, I don't know if it's just because of that daughter father relationship or it's because we're a lot alike where we get stubborn and we're like, fuck you. And then when I got older, I was like, sometimes when it comes to your parents, you just have to eat shit. And this is now I have two little boys now, so I'm like just preparing for that. They're like 3 and 7. And so I got a long way to go. And so I'm just like my older one, he's already using my own terms against me. If we're in an argument and it's getting maybe a little heated, he's mommy, I'm trying to talk to you, but you keep interrupting me. I'm like at the same time, like I was like, I'm trying not to laugh. Like I'm in shock so I definitely, that stuff will definitely resonate because so much of that is you're reflecting on your relationship with your father, and it was such a unique. You were such in a unique position as a child of, for lack of better words, a globally recognized actor and from a very popular show and so it's and even just the cult the fandom like it just transcends generations you have that unique position for and the difficulty that comes with that not forget even
Mhm.
just a normal father son relationship that might fall into those pitfalls it's adding on that your desire to want more like you wanted more you needed more from him as a father and
Mhm.
you how you mentioned just evaluating your own place as a father, your own role as a father, and like how you want to fulfill that, how what kind of place that you want to take a space that you want to take up in your family, which I thought totally good, like as a parent in general, totally resonated with me as someone, like I said, who's had my own issues with my father in my other adolescent years. Totally understand that. And yeah, it's I think so much of that will resonate with other readers. And that's why I say I appreciated you just being vulnerable. And yeah, like you said earlier, you didn't want to put all the blame. You were very much being accountable, and I think that's so important, and so it definitely came off on the page, and you didn't play the blame game. You were just reflecting on your experiences and, like, your roadmap, as it were, to, like, your journey and you looking forward, reflecting and looking forward. So, yeah, all of those points hit for sure. Tapping into that a little bit, was it difficult for you to, like, tap into the headspace? Did you have any problems, like, being vulnerable or authentic or organizing? Did you have to get in the zone? Did you have to take a break? Things like that? Where were you at when you were developing your stories?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. The thing is, Megan, I've been in 12-step recovery for 20 years.
Mhm.
And it's part of the course that you go to meetings and you share this stuff. And you make yourself vulnerable. That is a part of the process of recovery. One of the many things we do in recovery, it's a program of action. You got to do stuff to get it, to keep it, to keep the train running. So I had a lot of practice talking about these issues with people, and therapy is helpful too. But really bearing your soul in a group with a bunch of strangers, it's 12-step recovery. That's just what the way it works. It's great for me. It helps me process stuff. I know I'm in a room with people, like-minded people who are struggling to deal with life on life's terms without using or drinking. There's no crosstalk, there's no judgment. People can't, they can riff on something you said, but they can comment on it, but they can't, there's no conversation that goes on about it. I just get to share what I want. I have to do it in 2 minutes before the buzzer goes off, the bell goes off. So you have to really think about what it is you want to share. All these things I think were very helpful in preparing me to just lay it out on the page. A lot of this stuff was things that I had shared. A lot of it's flat out. One is a discussion I had at Beit Teshuva, a lecture I gave at this is a residential addiction treatment center, and it's the High Holy Days. I'm there on Yom Kippur, and I have to address 100 plus residents who are in recovery there, plus the congregation, and it's about recovery. It's all about recovery. My life is really about recovery and sharing it, processing it, hoping it resonates with other people. That's what the whole game is about, at least at this stage of my life.
Yeah. Were you nervous to start? Were you nervous to make that first step into stepping on that podium and sharing like, for the first time?
No, I mean, because I love it because I love getting up in front of a group, and I honed my skills by being in, after the crash and burn of my directing career, due in no small part to drugs and alcohol. I went into teaching at the New York Film Academy for I think about 8 years, and that's where I really got to hone my skills of getting up in front of a group of people and keeping these people entertained and teaching them something that will inspire them. So I had a lot of practice. And the fact is, the apple doesn't fall that far. I'm just a frustrated actor who never wanted to be an actor. I love getting up in front of a crowd. I freaking love it. It's so much fun for me. And in fact, weirdly enough, just last Friday, I was the keynote speaker for the graduating class at the New York Film Academy. I haven't taught there in about 10 years, but I'm still close to the guys who run that school. And there were about 100 plus 150 graduates maybe. And we were in an auditorium, and I love getting up in front of a group, and because I love writing, and it's about writing it out and memorizing it and presenting myself and keeping people's attentions and trying to appeal to their sensibilities and keep them it's a whole combination of entertainment and messaging, and it's something I've always enjoyed. I never wanted to be an actor, but I love playing the part of an orator in front of a crowd. I'm doing that now as I promote the book. I'm on podcasts. I'm doing interviews. I just got off of a local TV station here in LA. I really enjoy the experience. I'm rarely nervous. I don't get the jitters. I just enjoy the experience.
Good for you, 'cause I'm much more confident in the written word than I am, like, getting in front. This is different, this is, like, one-on-one, and I've done this, like, a million times, but I don't know, I think it's not even the strangers aspect, because I think the older that I get, the less I care about, you know, being a big dork, but I think it's, yeah, just not being used to the speaking and being, like, articulate and doing it where it just comes natural, where I get excited about it and that energy comes through. I don't feel like my energy comes through in a group or in a room full of people. I've just but I think it's just my personality. I've just been like that my whole life. I've been fine not being the center of attention. I'd like to avoid it if at all possible. So that's so fascinating. I didn't how so many of your experiences and just what you enjoy doing, like how much of that crossed over into things that you've done or decided to do in different either different projects or different working on yourself, things like that. I don't know. I wouldn't expect that, but that makes total sense.
I mean, that's something I learned from my father. The artist's way is to bring all of your experience to bear on the moment, to be in the moment, but to bring everything you have, to bring your A game always. And that's one of the things I really admired about my dad. Whatever he was doing, it didn't matter. And I talk about it in the book. He would give these readings on the book of Jonah on Yom Kippur to a half empty, not even half empty. There might be 2 dozen people in the congregation, but it never mattered to him. He was just a consummate professional and always brought the best of himself, no matter what the circumstances were. It was something that's one of the many things that I admired about his dad. And that's one of the big issues with the book was that I had to be very careful of, and that I had some really good direction editorially, is that even though I humanized my dad by talking about some of his foibles, I'm very careful to say that I always respected him and his work. I was always proud of him and his work. And I'm very careful to say that this is a guy who was raised by a couple of Russian immigrants who didn't know anything about America, pop culture, parenting. They were just trying to survive. They left because the family was being killed periodically in the village they were living in. And that my dad came out to LA desperate to survive. And that was just a whole different mindset. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that there are so many things I learned from my dad, and there's so many ways that I'm grateful that he was my dad. I loved the ride, but I did have to deal with some of the challenges of being the son of Leonard Nimoy. And yeah, it's like any other father-son relationship. And that's why I hope the book resonates with people. But I had this extra added element, which was that he was adored by millions of people all over the world.
Yeah, and he was from what I got from your memoirs, like, he was respectful about it. He didn't really let on that he was exhausted by the fandom. He was just open or even if he was exhausted, yeah, like, he didn't I got the impression that he was just so grateful for the fans in general and, you
That is
know
correct.
yeah. So wait, was your
As am
father
I.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because yeah, I can't imagine how far your name carries even if you weren't in the Hollywood industry for so long.
And wherever I go, Megan, around the world, if people recognize my name, they start glowing. When I travel all over the world, I see images of Spock everywhere.
Mm.
I mean, I was in Barcelona last year. There was a painting of Spock in a matador outfit, in a store window. It's ridiculous. And I got a text from a friend of mine who was in a small village in the Apennine Mountains of Italy, and there was a postcard of Spock in a shop.
Oh,
He's,
wow.
omnipresent. The guy is everywhere, and that's okay. It was difficult when I was having trouble with him, but it's a great source of pride now, and it's wonderful meeting the fans. I was at the Star Trek convention a few weeks ago, and those people are so grateful, and they just feel like when they shake hands with me, they feel like they're connected to Leonard's DNA, and they get a charge out of it, and I think it's lovely. It really is lovely.
Oh, that's such a good attitude because I can imagine how people can become maybe a little more easily cynical in that situation or just I don't know. I that's a great attitude. I love that. Something I'm curious, so your grandparents was your dad already he was born well Russia, Ukraine, or did they have him after they moved here?
No, they had him, and he was born in 1931. His brother was a few years older than him. They got here after World War One in the early 20s. And no, he was born and raised in the West End of Boston, which was an immigrant neighborhood, very insular, Irish, Italian, and a lot of Russian Jews.
Yeah.
And it was a nice neighborhood. It was in a nice part of town. They had a very good life there. But my grandparents were people who came from a village that was unpaved. There were no paved roads. It was like
Mm.
a one horse town, and now they're in the middle of this urban center. So it was big culture shock for them. But they struggled and survived, and they did very well, and they had a nice life there. Boston's an amazing city. It's unfortunate that in 1950 Some developers looked at the property and thought, we've got prime real estate here.
Mm,
Why are all these immigrants living here? And they cleared them out and destroyed the neighborhood and built these high rise apartment buildings.
yeah.
That was unfortunate. When I was back in Boston recently, and I'm going back again next month, I love the city. I love the history. I'm a history guy. It's got so much of American history there. And I feel my dad, I feel my grandparents. I can you just feel where he was because I walked those streets with him when we made a little documentary about his life there a couple years before he died. And it's an amazing experience to relive that.
Yeah, and yeah, just stories like that, I wanna it's almost like, yeah, I could see that his parents were strict, like, but it was also like they were raising American kids when they were not didn't really always consider themselves fully American. Like I talked to some authors who are like that. Either they are in your father's place where they were raised as like they were American kids growing up, but they had to find their role and with respecting the culture, whether or not they had a choice in their normal lives versus in trying to enjoy American life that what had to offer whatever decade that you were in. Um, because I can imagine kids being like, "Mom, Dad, it's okay, whatever. This isn't a big deal." But then they're like, "Oh my god," like clutching their pearls. "What are you doing? What we don't do this." And so yeah, or even people like who come from other countries, but they're raising American children. So I guess I have a little sympathy for that just because I have never and probably hopefully knock on wood will never know what that is having to go through another country and then raising children from a country completely different from my
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because actually, what was going on at this time was that there were a bunch of kids hanging around on street corners, not knowing what to do with themselves after school. And a lot of the city officials were worried that these guys were going to turn into gangs, which they, informally were. So they created these things called settlement houses for
Mm,
after school activities where you could do intramural sports, you could take science classes. And in one of those settlement houses, they had a theater and they were putting up little stage productions, and that's where Leonard caught the bug. That's where it happened. They had to do something with these kids who didn't know what to do with themselves
that's
because they were
amazing.
not assimilated. They're living in this very insular neighborhood. Their parents don't know what to do with them. They don't know anything about America. So these settlement houses were very instrumental in helping these kids transition into the culture that they were now living in. And this was key for my dad to catch the acting bug. And then one summer he was in Boston College in the drama department. He got the scholarship to go, and that made a huge impression on him. And this is why his journey is so spectacular. At age 18, he told his parents, I want to go to Hollywood and study acting and pursue a career there. And they thought he was
Yeah.
crazy. And he got on a train, 18 years old. He got on a 3-day train ride to LA with no connect. And his parents wouldn't support it. They didn't want to help him because they thought they wanted him to live their idea of the American dream. You go to college, you become a doctor or a lawyer. That's it. And that was not Leonard in any way, shape, or form. That was his older brother. Mel went to Northeastern MIT, but that was not Leonard by any stretch of the imagination. So it took a lot of guts for him to break away and break out of that bubble and transform himself in American society. And my dad would often say that's why the Spock character for him was he was able to bring that character to life because Spock is the same way. Spock's an alien. He's working on the bridge of the Enterprise. They're all human. They're multiracial, multinational, but they're all human. He's the only outsider. And that's what resonates with all these fans all over the world. It's all of us loners and geeks and nerds and weirdos. We all identify with Spock because he's the ultimate outsider. And it's actually okay to be so. In fact, for a lot of people, it's like, it was cool. He made being an outsider and a geek and a nerd a cool thing.
Yeah, and I'll preface this I probably should have just started the interview with this, but I never got into Star Trek, I never watched. It's not only is it a couple generations before my time, but yeah, even in, like, the modern adaptations, that's, like, more of my husband's wheelhouse. But from the gist that I got was that Spock was unapologetic too. He was staying honest to himself, and he didn't unless I'm completely getting that wrong, because like I said, I don't I'm only familiarity I have is through either pop culture, not through the actual watching of the series itself.
You're not alone.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's why I think and it probably did help me, like, focus more on you in this book and helping me understand, like you said, the most human, like him as a person. and him as a person first, actor,
Mhm.
maybe father second. So let's see here. Look at did you have to do I know this is like your life and everything and it's like your firsthand account, like you're the source, but did you have to do any like additional research to refresh your memory or add some more details? Like what did the how did that go like for you?
It was a matter of delving into the journals I've been keeping pretty regularly for the past 15 years, which I can't stand doing. It's unedited and a lot of it's stream of consciousness and a lot of it is just morning pages that I force myself to write even though I'm not inspired. So you have to wade through an insurmountable amount of material because I didn't want to leave anything out. I didn't want to like you always have this nightmare that you go to press and then you find something that is on point, on theme that you should have included, and you just want to hang yourself. So there was that. So it was a lot of that, and there were a number of like phone messages that I do recount that are in the book, and I had to go back and dig up the tapes because a lot of the voicemails that I've gotten I've kept over the years, and then I recorded on back then it was on tape medium. So there were some things from my mother that I wanted to include that I had to go back and listen to her stuff, and a couple things from my friend Justin, who is in the book. He left me some very amusing messages. So there was that kind of stuff that I wanted to look at. And so it was really just really the journal research that I had to do and to make sure that I wasn't going to miss something that was, you know, and that happened when I made a Spock documentary about my dad. And in the course of producing that film, I was looking through some boxes and I found this letter. There's a letter in the book of this book about when my dad and I were estranged from each other about his disappointment with me, and that was the touchstone of hitting bottom where I was told to go make an amends to him for everything in that letter. It was all of his feelings about me, his judgments towards me, his reservations about me, the reasons why he felt that I was really the problem in the relationship, a lot of the screw ups that happened in my life, all the mistakes I made. But he also wrote me a letter in '73. That letter came out in 2000. It was he wrote to me around 2006. In 1973, I didn't know this, and I discovered this while making this documentary that he wrote me a letter after we had one of our first major knockdown dragouts when I was 17 and was starting to stand up for myself and not take his stuff anymore. He wrote me a letter of almost apology, talking about the fact that it was going to be very difficult arguing with him because he was very verbal. He's a tough kid from the streets of Boston, and you don't fuck with him. And third and maybe foremost, he was rich and famous,
Mm,
and that is a very difficult thing to deal with. And that was the kind of thing where it was serendipitous that I found that letter because I needed that to show that there's another human side to Leonard, that he wanted to be a good dad, that it was a struggle for him, that we had lost our way after he wrote that letter because it was just periodic episodes of complete conflict with nothing, no way out, no tools, exacerbated by my pot smoking and his alcoholism. I wanted to be careful that I didn't have one of those situations. I was lucky I found that letter while we were in production and we included it in the movie, the documentary. But I hadn't seen that thing. I found that we made that movie in 2015. That letter was dated 1973.
that's
You know what I'm saying?
great you
So
found it.
yeah, my dad would call that beshert. It's just fate that it showed up. It was like Leonard saying, "There's something else that you need to put in that film. Find the letter." This is Leonard from Beyond the Grave. Find that letter.
Oh, it's like, "Don't
So
miss the juicy stuff, son, come on."
yeah, don't try to be thorough, and that's what the research comes in. I had to research my own stuff, and it's time consuming and it's just tedious sometimes. And I don't even want to. I just don't want to wade through that material. I just want to get the
Yeah.
book out.
Yeah, the work it takes the time that it takes and the work, but it's worth it in the end, obviously. If you were I imagine you finding that was that kind of like a little bit of a shock, or did you know about it, or you found it and you were like, "Oh, holy shit."
I didn't know about it. Just going. I'm a pack rat, and I keep a lot of this stuff. And I had a whole box full of letters from everybody over the years, beginning in the early '70s. And I was just going through the box, and they appeared. And I
That
brought it in the next day. I showed it to the producers, and it was like, we're not only are we going to use it, we're going to film you reading it.
Ooh,
At least parts of it, not in its entirety. Again, it's an editorial decision. There
yeah.
were just parts of it that we knew that we wanted. There was a lot of stuff in there that we didn't need, but it was very illuminating. And it's just, I talk about it in the book, and I talk about the fact that it's so strange that We forgot about it. I forgot about it. He forgot about it. And we lost our way after that completely. Again, because we didn't have tools. My dad didn't have tools to deal with conflict. I mean, his dad was the same way. I mean, his mother wore the pants of the family, but his
Mm.
dad was just like my dad. Inscrutable is the best word to describe these guys. I mean, they didn't talk about their feelings.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't honest, and open and vulnerable. That was not a part of their vocabulary. These are tough guys in the depression who were just, show that side as a man.
Yeah, they kind of survival was on their mind, not like emotional regulation. It's a different time set, a different mindset, like different psyche that it shows what's important. What do they call it? My psychology background, it's like the hierarchy of needs. That's not we need
That was
food. We don't need
We need
resolve
food.
our
We need shelter.
conflict right now. So just a few more questions. What we talked about it a little bit. What were the most challenging parts to write and what were the most enjoyable parts to write?
Let me think here. The challenging parts to I think probably the stuff where I don't know. There's so much stuff. The challenging parts were finding. Look here. Okay, here's the thing about the theme of the. We're going to go back to theme for a minute. I think it's the best way to answer this. So what I was trying to show was that in my recovery, which I came to at a point in my life where I was high all the time, and my kids were old enough to see that there was something going on, and I needed to confront that. I also needed to confront the fact that my marriage was long over and I was getting high just to get through the sadness and the grief of having a failing being living in a failing marriage. I went sober because of those reasons. Basically, I pretty much hit bottom. And the book is the focus is really about being in recovery and dealing with the people who challenged me most in my recovery. And they, in the beginning, were my soon-to-be ex-wife, my Jewish mother, my martyr, my martyred self-martyred Jewish mother, and my teenage daughter. And the book is trying to find episodes where they were challenging me, and things were difficult with them, and I was trying to learn how to use the tools of recovery to deal with these very charged situations. That is the whole part of my recovery, is the fact that I'm responsible for my second thought and my first action. But I need to get to my second thought because my first thought is almost always fuck you. Fuck me, fuck
Mhm.
you. That
Mhm.
is my first reaction. When people press my buttons or they piss me off or they say provocative things or somebody cuts me off on the San Diego freeway, that is the first thing that comes to my mind because I'm an addict, and that's where I go. When you become an addict, you are in arrested development. You're not maturing emotionally, and I started using regularly when I was 17, and I'm still acting like a teenager when I act that way and I act out that way. So a lot of it was, trying to find these episodes. The challenging part was finding these episodes where I had to put the tools of recovery into my life. We practice these principles in all our affairs. And the tools of recovery for me were things like count to 10 before you say shit, count to 10, count to 20, restraint of pen and tongue, contrary action, and let go and let God. And my all time favorite, don't just do something, sit there. Dude, I have to sit there until I can get a grip on my brain.
Yeah.
And that's the challenging part of recovery, and that I wanted to include in the book, and to find these moments where my mother, my ex-wife, and my daughter were pushing my butt, and Jonah too, my son too, periodically. But those are the ones who really were challenging me, and so I needed to find episodes in which I was, and sometimes I would relapse. We call them emotional relapse. I really got over the obsession of drinking and using very quickly. I just was so tired of being high, and I was never an alcoholic to begin with. And one of my sponsors said, "You will probably, I believe you, you're not an alcoholic. But having said that, you should have no problem never taking another drink."
Mhm.
And he was right. I just didn't. It was weed that was my problem. But the issue that I have to deal with is emotional sobriety and emotional relapse. That is
Mhm.
opening my mouth and saying shit that I'm going to have to make an amends for later on. And I hate making amends to
Yeah.
people. So I'd rather just use the tools of recovery to get a grip on my brain. And all of these were practice sessions for the big boy. That's the point. That's the arc of the book,
Yeah.
is that I'm working through my recovery and learning how to use the tools because I'm getting prepared for the ultimate showdown with Leonard. And that's really what the book is about for me, is coming to grips with the big guy that I had to make an amends to, even though in my heart I really didn't believe he deserved one ever. He went sober before I did. He never made an amends to me, ninth step. So why the fuck should I ever turn around after he sent me this 6-page letter of why I am my fuck up to go to him and make an amends to him? And that's the hard part, the struggle. That's the blood on the page. That's being vulnerable, being honest, being open. That's the hard part about what the book is really about.
God, you're a I hate I'm not good at apologizing either. I'm not perfect, but I feel that where, yeah, if I feel like someone doesn't deserve it, I won't. Even if I'm clearly have something to apologize for, it's very hard for me. So I totally get that. I totally get that, like, and how difficult that was for you. Even after you feel like you've made so much progress, right? And you felt like you were owed one too, but from what I remember reading, it was like he seemed a little impressed by you that you did that, and it shifted a little bit, like
Yeah, it shocked him. It shocked him because my dad was doing this thing because he expected negative engagement, and that's what we had. He hated being estranged. He'd rather us be in a fight than us be not talking to each other.
mm,
So he did a lot of provocative things. Wrote me that letter, basically, and it was very. It wasn't out of love. It was a very. It was just a not pleasant experience. But the fact of the matter, and my first instinct, because my first thought is always "f you," is to write him a 10-page letter with all his screw up. Because I got them. We all have them. It's in the hard drive. I know the shit he pulled.
yeah.
I was always proud of him. There's no doubt about it. And I learned a lot from him. But the fact of the matter is, he was challenged when it came to fatherhood. That's just a fact. I know that. I have a validation from my sister, from my mother, from my dad's business manager, who was like a second father to me. I know my dad had character defects, but that none of that mattered. It doesn't matter. So when I got the letter and I'm sharing this with my friends and I'm saying I'm not going to respond to it because those are the tools of recovery, a lot of them were like, that's great. You're practicing these principles in all your affairs. You're not going to react to it. You're not going to send him a letter taking his inventory. Great for you. Bravo. But I had one friend in recovery who knew me very well since because he was one of my lower companions. And he's the guy who said, oh no, this is a great opportunity. Go make an amends with that letter. You apologize to him for everything in it. And I'm like, fuck that.
Yeah.
I will never do that. Never.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I remember reading about that part where that was just like everything in your being, every instinct, every part of you was fighting that advice. You were like, "Oh, hell no. You must be crazy if you think that I am going to do everything that goes against, like, my emotional self-preservation," right? You don't know how
Exactly.
that interaction's gonna go if you go and say, "Okay, it's like you're saying, "You're right, I'm sorry," to someone who doesn't seem to get it, like, their role in it. I
Exactly correct.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I can't imagine how difficult that was for you.
It's difficult, but then the game changed. Everything changed. Because to my dad's credit, that day he was like, oh, okay, thank you very much. Why don't you come to dinner next Friday for Shabbat?
Yeah.
And then, as I say, and then he did come around and he did make an amends to me. We call it a living amends by helping me with my late wife, my second wife, Martha. When she got sick, my dad was like there for me emotionally, showing up with food. So I had things to feed us during the week, taking me out to go to a meeting, taking me out to go to Shabbat at this residential addiction treatment center that I'm now a board member of. My dad really, he showed up in a way that he could never have done when I was younger. He was just not focused on that. Family was not a priority. And we call it a living amends. And I'm grateful for that. Look, here's the bottom line really is that to hold on to resentment, we like to say in recovery, is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no point to resentment. It's just self infliction of damage. It's a waste of time. It's harmful to us. I'm in recovery. I love everybody. I do love everybody. I'm looking for the good in everybody. I'm trying to, if people come at me, I know now, don't take it personally. That's another big mantra in recovery. When people come at me, even when my dad would come at me, I would know sometimes this is not about me. This is
Yeah.
not about me.
Yeah.
This is because Leonard's really frustrated about some stuff that's going on in his life that I happen to know about. So I'm not going to take it personally.
Yeah, that's so powerful. It's something along the lines like forgiveness is for you rather than the other person, because it's
That's exactly what my friend said. The amends is not for him. Make the amends. It's not for him.
yeah,
It's for you.
yeah,
It's for you to finally let go of your resentment towards him.
yeah.
This is all about you. So see if you see it that way. I didn't at first, but then it was a huge relief, frankly, after that because I wanted to have a relationship with my dad, and it appeared for 7 years before he died. I just loved hanging out with the guy. He'd call me up and he'd say, "What are you doing right now?" I'm like, it'll be like a late morning. I don't nothing. Right, I'm working. I'm reading. I'm writing. He'd say, "What about lunch? Are you available for lunch?" Yeah, come on up to the house. Okay, and that's what it was like the last 7 years. So it was freaking amazing. It was so good.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you guys got that with each other. That's a success story about all the non-easy, the most difficult parts of that type of relationship and pulling yourself out of that. I love that. That's how it ended for you guys. And
We
then
were lucky.
yeah,
We
because
were
there's so many people who don't pull themselves out of it and who can't get past that, for lack of a better word, self-righteousness. It's hard. We're all human. Take on the title. I'm looking at the book cover. I loved all the photos that you included because it does add another layer of just that personal touch, like that authenticity. I just really enjoyed all the did how did you decide on the cover photo? Because it's adorable. I love it.
It's me with dad on the set. That was on July of '66. This is about 5 weeks before the show even went on the air.
Okay.
And I love it because it was one of the things that did bind us was that I was old enough to be a fan, one of the first fans of the show. I'm old enough to be one of the first cosplay people. Cosplay is just an institution now, but I maintain I'm one of the pioneers because I was they dressed me up, and I'm really proud of that. It's just I just it was a very privileged position to be in and to be with him because looking back now at it, you with the benefit of hindsight, it's like I'm with Spock. This is a character we didn't know it then. This is a character that's going to be around for forever,
Yeah.
and he's going to have this impact on people all over the world. I mean, my dad tells me these crazy stories about people when they recognize him, they just go wild. It's just amazing these stories he tells me. And so it's more poignant now when I have the benefit of time because and I'm still there. I'm still on the set with him. I'm still experiencing that. But now it's more meaningful because I know what happens. I know how that story ends, both in terms of his character and in terms of us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's seeing the visual adds that layer to the memory, to how you're reflecting on those memories, and it's just so much more impactful, exactly how you said, because you know how the story ends, and it adds that emotional impact for sure. I think that's like I was getting into your story as a reader. It was just like, oh, some really touching, engaging stuff. And then it was like blast from the past, like a visual of either you and your family, like your parents and your sister, or as you're going through and keeping the reader along through those points. I enjoy stuff like that, but I yeah, because I've got like your website it up here and I'm just like looking at the cover. I'm like, I was right there, right there.
Good.
Oh, just a couple more questions. Let's
Sure.
see here. So, what I'm gonna ask it anyway. What advice do you have for your younger self?
What advice from my younger self? I don't really have any regrets. I'm just glad I held on and didn't. Look, the fact is that I did accomplish a lot in my life and not to worry so much about competing or being as successful or these are things that used to concern me. That I yearned to really be much more than I thought I was. I have to remember not to compare myself to what the trajectory that Leonard had. And it's really in the book when Justin says to me, "Look, you chose a much smaller path. You should walk it well." And that is something that I really appreciated. And it would have been much more helpful to me, even though I think I did just fine. But that is what I would have told my younger self is just follow my own path. Don't compare myself. Compare and despair, we say in the program. Don't worry about Leonard. He's going to come around, at some point. You two will be just fine together just keep stay on the path that I'm on and stay focused on what I'm doing. Because when I look back at my own life, I accomplished a lot. It just wasn't on that kind of a scale, but it doesn't. But that's he's a very unique situation. How far he flew, and the man that he was, it was nothing like him. I was a much more a guy who was more interested in enjoying my life, enjoying my family, raising my kids, spending time with them from the get go, and not worrying too much about my career. It was just a part that was just another part of my life. I think that's it. Just to tell myself to stay on the path. It might be a smaller path. Just walk away.
That's solid advice no matter what age you're at. Like, obviously, when you're older, like, it's retrospect, you reflect on your life and you're like, "Yeah, I could have done A, B, and C differently, or I wish I would have done A, B, and C differently." But I think that's really important to just compare yourself to you. And I think that's really powerful, and that shows a lot of strength for you as a person that you consciously try to not compare yourself to such an iconic figure, for lack of better words.
Right. Yeah.
That's really great, that's powerful. Let's see here. What maybe this follows along the same line. What do you hope readers get out of your story, The Most Human?
Here's the point for me is that you don't need to be an addict or an alcoholic to use the tools of recovery. That's just the bottom line, really, in my experience. I mean, I've been sober for 20 years now, but sobriety is just a part of the equation. You don't have to be. A lot of people are in Al Anon. That's 12 steps for people who have a family member who's a problem because they're an addict or an alcoholic. But I've been to, I'm a double winner. I go to Al Anon and AA meetings, and those people in Al Anon are not sober. You don't have to be an addict or an alcoholic to use the tools of recovery. Just go to a meeting. And that relationships are, there is hope even for seemingly hopeless relationships, because I was in one with my dad. I had no idea what to do with this guy, no clue at all, and thought that, and was almost resigned to the fact that this is the way it's going to be. I'm going to show up for him. I'm going to celebrate his many successes, but we may never have a meaningful relationship. And then I just had to accept and live with. But that's not the case. There is hope, and I'm hoping that people see that in my story, that it resonates with them. As you were saying, it really is just a father son story with this other element always out there about his immense popularity. But I just try to boil it down to conflict between father and son. And I'm not the only one. This has been going on. This goes on all over town. I'm hoping it resonates with people and they'll find some hope and maybe go get some help and maybe go to a meeting somewhere that they feel comfortable sitting in and learning something about the tools of recovery.
Yeah, I never really figured that. I don't have experience with that, but that's really interesting that it's really helpful for people who aren't having those types of issues. So that's really cool. I didn't
You
think
don't need to
about
be an addict or an alcoholic to be in recovery. Everybody's recovering from something.
Yeah,
Everybody.
yeah. Oh my god, preach. You've got that right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. It's
So
in the
what's next for you? Are you working on anything that you could talk about or just promoting your book?
Well, right now, I mean, the promotion is intense. I'm going on a huge book tour even now, this late in the game, from beginning soon until June of next year. But there is another book. I can't talk about it yet because I have to still discuss it with my agent. There's a lot more material that I have. When I was delving into this book, I realized that there was something else that I'm really interested in writing about. Um, the material is there, but I need a lot more coaching as to how to present it. So I'm going to wait. I'll get back to you on that about what it's going to be about. I love writing. I love the craft of writing. I love rewriting. It's very similar to being an editorial after I shot a show. It's what do we have to work with and how can we maximize the emotional impact through the editorial process. That's what it's all about to me, whether I'm filmmaking or I'm also interested in photography or I'm writing. So I want to stick with the writing. I want to keep the momentum going. I hope to come back to you and be on your podcast with another book.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't wanna get you in trouble, so go ahead and keep those details to yourself for now.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Okay,
Mhm.
Adam Nimoy, where can we find you online and on social media?
Just go to adamnimoy.com, www.adamnimoy.com. All of my social media handles are there. Most of the upcoming events I'm going to be doing are there. We try to keep it current, and I've got to go look at it now. You just reminded me, but that's probably the best place to go to find out what's happening.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so The Most Human, Reconciling with My Father, Leonard Nimoy. Adam, thank you so much for joining me, for your time, for your awesome answers, and just being honest and authentic, both in the book and in person. And yeah, like you said, I'll be happy to chat again when and if you're ready to talk some more.
Megan, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And it's some very pointed questions. It's good to be put on the spot. It's good to be challenged because the deep dig is what it's all about for me.
Yeah,
So it was
perfect. You
wonderful.
you handled it well, just like you probably expected to. But it sounds like that's what you live for.
It is. So thank you so much.
There you go. That was Adam Nimoy talking about his memoir, The Most Human, Reconciling with My Father, Leonard Nimoy. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you'll find links to find Adam online and on social media, and as well as Cantina Book Club. Please go ahead and click the few likes and subscribes and all that good stuff to help everyone out. If you need book recommendations, you can check out cantinabookclub.com. I'm always writing reviews and posting them on there. And as I always say, pre-orders and readings and reviews help the authors out so much. And of course, thank you guys so much for listening.